Let's talk about banking issue because from 2008 the situation started deteriorating and issue of non-performing assets
Yeah,
NPAs
yeah,
was a
yeah,
major one when the
yeah, yeah,
government came
yeah,
into
yeah,
power.
yeah.
So many steps were suggested, including bad bank.
Right.
But right now, saying in 2022, saying that this is a legacy issue, and because of the mistakes of the Congress, a lot of people are not buying into it.
Yes,
That you are there for the last 7 8 years now, you have to do something about it.
yes,
So what can be done to really solve that issue? Because I think the private investment part is still not
yes,
able to, we are not
yes,
able to restart
yes,
that.
yes,
Most of the investment is being driven by the government in
yes,
infrastructure and other things.
yes, yes. So, if you permit me to go
Yeah.
back a little bit, I know your question is about what can be done now.
Yeah.
Your viewers should have some idea of what was the kind of mistakes that were done and why it is justified to say that it's still a legacy issue. See, the 2008 regulation, most people don't, there was a circular issued in August 2008.
Hmm.
The circular was that you can restructure loans and you don't have to call it an NPA. The
Okay.
regulation until then was that if you restructure a loan, let's say you have lent to me and I'm struggling, right? And I'm not able to pay. And restructuring could be you give me more time, or any of the ways you can reduce my interest rate,
Hmm.
or waive my 20% loan. If you do any of these, you had to call it an NPA, non-performing asset, and make provisions that would impact your capital. That day only, everybody knows that you have done that.
Okay.
In 2008, because anticipating this global financial crisis, the spillover effect of that, they did this policy that you can restructure without calling it an NPA. Now, there is nothing wrong with that. During crisis, even this time it was done. The difference is, you will not believe, it was continued for 7 long years till 2015. Even in 2010, when the economic growth was 9%, there were quarters where we barely missed 10%. This was the only country in the history of the world which is growing at 10%, and will have this. This is called forbearance.
Hmm.
So this forbearance is when you are minus 10%. We had forbearance when we were plus 10%. And because this became an addiction,
Hmm.
this was an addiction built over 7 years. It was not an addiction which was like a 1 month, one policy. This was withdrawn in 2015. So this existed from 2008 to 2015. And what happened was, so think that you are a banker. Now you lend me a loan.
Hmm.
Now you know that if I don't pay, you can just restructure. Then why will you screen? Why will you monitor? Why will you do anything? Because you know that it's not going to be an NPA. Right? Eventually you can just restructure, and if you restructure a loan, you don't have to call it an NPA. And then eventually in 2013 they introduced some small provisioning. So this completely killed banking discipline, and it led to all kinds of crony lending. In fact, I have 3-4 papers on that, and some of them published in top journals, where we show that firm governance deteriorated. Think about it. I am a bad CEO, right, of a firm, but I have connection to the manager of the bank. A lot of firms have to retain me because of this connection, because of this advantage. I'm going to get this cheap credit, and credit is required. It deteriorated firms, not just banks. It deteriorated bank governance, firm governance. Credit was given. We had 20-30% credit growth, and this money was thrown into a ditch. These bad firms, and ultimately promoters, what they did, they took this money, they did related party transaction. They created some shell firms, and this money went into shell firms which had no growth, no investment. Not surprisingly, by 13-14 we had fallen to again 5-6% growth. So this was not a small thing that you can't call it a legacy issue. This was a policy which continued for 7 long years. And if you are habituated to something bad for 7 long years, nobody can solve it in 1 year or 2 years. It will take, I think it may take 15 years to solve, because you have to. Now what has happened, what this government did, went to the other extreme of being very strict, and these people have become extremely risk averse. Now, from a point of lending to anybody and everybody, now we have reached a stage they won't lend to good people also, because of the experiences that we had. So we have to go through this. There is no other option. This is a problem of a bad policy. When you perpetuate a bad policy, you will have to go through all those reverse of all those good things for that long to get. There is no way you can solve it in a year. So I don't think anybody could have solved these banking issues in a year. But by now, more could have been done. I agree, more could have been done than what they have done. But this is not a small problem that this any Arun Jaitley could have come and solved it. So people have to appreciate the magnitude of the problem.
It's very interesting that a party which takes so much interest in communication, masterful communicators, including the Prime Minister,
Yeah.
the biggest one of all,
Yes.
they did not communicate this at all. People, I am listening to this for the first time that for 7 years this was going on.
Yes. So in fact, not 7 years, actually 10 years. See, officially, this is called regulatory forbearance. This is August 27, 2008 circular. You just read it. It's available on the RBI website, and I've written like 4 papers on it. 2015, when they did asset quality review, that was Rajan's time when they formally withdrew this. But actually, there also there were some other methods in which you could still do this. For example, you could convert debt into equity, and you could do all kinds of circus. Actually, it was in February 2018, the February circular of 2018. That is where this was completely withdrawn. So, in a way, we had a
It's 10 years.
emergency. Imagine an emergency tablet which has very high side effects, which you should take only when it's really, really bad. If you don't take, that person will die. Such a tablet being given to a person for 7 years full, and some small portion of it given for another 2 years. This is what was done in India. And the Prime Minister, unfortunately, what happened was, as he said later, see, there are 2 ways you can handle, right? One is, I have a paper. What I show is, when a new CEO comes into a firm, you know what he does? He has an incentive to show that everything was bad until then. This is called big bath hypothesis. You take a big bath so that you reduce the expectation to start with, and then you create space for outperformance. This is what CEOs also do. Best of the best CEOs. Unfortunately, the Prime Minister did not believe in that. So he thought that, and I think he underappreciated the issue also. I don't think he knew about all these forbearance, and he knew that he has this famous thing that 2008 तक इतना लोन दिया, 8 और 15 के बीच जितना लोन दिया वो, that was more than 47 to 2008. That he kept saying in his rallies. But क्यों दिया, कहाँ गया ये? This is because of this provision that you just imagine, as a banker you can just lend, and if there is a default, restructure. That is how these Malyas and Modis and Nirav Modis got created. Because you could have just given it to anyone. You don't have to bother about credit standards at all. It was a free for all, just loot. That persisted for this long. I don't think they were aware of the gravity of this issue.
So many bad firms got created.
So many, and even good firms had incentives to have bad managers who have connections than good managers who have ability.
And even they thought that because it is free for all, why not take
Yes.
extra money and
Yes.
expand?
Yeah, extra money, and they did 2 things. One, randomly expanded into areas of not their expertise.
Without the need.
And secondly, they did related party transaction. Related party transaction, where you take the money out of the company and pay to firms which are started by these promoters and others. Nobody knows where the money went. This must have gone abroad, Hawala, I don't know what happened. So heavily they did related party transactions. And then, as you said, this is called empire building. What you said is, in our academic language, we call it empire building, where you just invest because there's free money available without thinking about, because see, this is also called risk shifting, because if it works, this guy will benefit. If it doesn't work, bank will pay take the cost. So why should I bother? So this was the environment where the economy was running. And I'm not surprised that we went to 4% growth in 2018 or 19. And this is the scorched earth policy, right? If you create things so bad, after some time, even genuine people will start asking that why is it taking so much time to solve? I agree, this is that problem, but this is such a kind of a problem. If disease is such that it takes 10 years to recover, what can you do?